our geospatial map and data center. You could search this up by typing Ryerson GIS Lab. Should be the first link underneath, and we will head through the geospatial data and GIS button over here. We'll be going to search and download geospatial data. And for the most part, you'll be working in Toronto for your projects. So these are the useful links that you can access in order to retrieve information related to property data maps, which show boundaries for properties, the massings in plan view, things like catch basins and lampposts and fire hydrants. So everything related to architecture and infrastructure. We have 3D massings over here, and you can also access your contours. So for the most part, you'll be accessing these three types of files. So just to show you what this looks like, here is a map of Toronto, and we have sections divided into in terms of the files that you can download. And so for the most part, you guys will be working around, where's Eglinton? Around this area, seems. So depending on what site you have, download this and you'll retrieve a zip folder that has the DWGs that you'll be working with. And so I can open this in either AutoCAD or Rhino. For this tutorial, I'll show you how to do this in AutoCAD. And it's a lot of similar commands and functions, so it shouldn't be too difficult to navigate in either or. We have our layers panel over here, which you can access by typing layer. Well, don't select anything or don't click anything, type layer, and this should pop up. And you'll also want your properties tab, so that as well is typable into the command line. And here we could see all the properties related to the information that we've hovered or selected over. And so this is my property data map, which I've selected from that website I've shown you. And we have things such as the outlines of the sidewalks, our buildings that are on the properties, their addresses, things like lampposts and fire hydrants. And not all this information will be pertinent to your project. For the most part, I would think this is, at least for this part of the project that you're doing, is site analysis and site context. So choosing the pertinent data to be shown in your project is an important part of sifting through these files. So not everything's useful, and what we can do is we can go through them and see what type of information we can filter out to make our file not only smaller, but more concise to the information we would like to show. And easy way to do this is selecting or just going through and clicking the objects and seeing what layer they're on. So this is the light standard layer. Not really important for me, so I can choose the command layoff, select that, and whatever object you have, the entire layer of that object will be hidden. And this is important because once we start to link or import our files, there's a selection that's based off your layers that will determine what is visible in Revit. So I'm not a fan of these numbers as well, so I could lay off those. If I click these, I guess, light blue colored rectangles, we have garages, so I'm not really interested in showing garages as well, so I'll lay off my garage. What other information? I would say things like these are catch basins, so we don't want those. What are these? If I select it, that's a traffic light standard. So I just want my buildings, my roads, anything that would relate to site plan. Okay, so I'll continue doing that, and that's roughly like some misc structures. Even that is not really useful. And you'll see in our layers tab, or layers panel, rather, if I expand it, anything that has been laid off, its visibility will be off as well. So the light bulb indicates that it's not going to be shown. And so what I could do from there is I can save as, and you'll probably want to keep a file just for the base that has all of the important data and save whenever you want to filter out different pieces of information. And so I've already saved this building as a DWG format as buildings only. So I could save there. And now when I head into Revit, I'll have two different options of inserting my drawings. As I mentioned, there's linking, which has several file types such as Revit or CAD drawings, and there's importing. So does anybody know the difference between linking and importing? Feel free to speak if you know. Okay, so well, the difference is linking will have will retain the reference to the external file so that anytime that external file is updated or modified, then those updates will be able to be loaded into Revit, not automatically, but through a button that says reload. Versus importing, you're taking that information from the external file. So I'm taking all these lines that I've selected, bringing them into Revit, but there is no link that's retained to that reference file. So any changes made to this AutoCAD drawing hereafter will not be able to be loaded into Revit. So the benefit of linking over importing is that you maintain that, that relationship between those two files, while importing you can kind of make some of those elements of the import editable. And in most cases, because AutoCAD works with, if I select this and type my properties tab, polylines and lines and curves, you'll be able to edit them as model lines and detail lines in Revit. However, that obviously would make your file size a lot larger. So I would suggest that for the most part, or any more times than not, you would want to link your file rather than import. So let's do that. Let's go to our Insert tab, and under the Links panel, let's click Link CAD. And so we're met with this dialog box that has several options. We could choose the type of files we have in terms of DWG, and the second more important file would be the ACIS SAT file, which I will talk about briefly later. I am importing my base file. And we have three options to the left, which discuss the visibility properties of that AutoCAD file. So I can choose to preserve those colors that we saw. So the blue and the white and the orange to make it more identifiable in Revit, or I could select the invert of it or black and white. I'll choose black and white. Now, I mentioned that it's important that we choose which layers are visible and which are not, because there's this option here that allows us to link our file with only the visible layers shown. And ensure that your units are the same in both AutoCAD and Revit, otherwise you're going to have some sort of weird scaling issues when you're bringing that file in. So I have my file in meters, and so I'll just verify that with the import units. These two options relate to your placement of the drawing. And so I could choose to match origins of AutoCAD and Revit, or I could select manual origin or manual center to manually place it in by clicking. So I will keep it at origin to origin for now. And our place level, I only have one level, right? One level I could place it at. So let's place it at level 1. Open. And typically these take a little bit of time, so expect anywhere from 1 to even 5-10 minutes, depending on how much information you're bringing in to Revit. So here I have my base file that has basically all the information, and you'll notice that my computer's struggling because it's such a big file. I can select it and move it as a unit. Just make sure that your pin is unpinned, otherwise it'll stay in its place. So it could be selected but not editable. And I could move this around simply like that. Do that move. What can we do now that we've linked our external file? We can go to the Insert tab, choose Manage Links. Make sure you do save your project every now and then. We can select the type of link that we have. Ours is a CAD format and shows where the name of it and where it's loaded from. So I can unload this, meaning that it'll be out of Revit and you're severing the link basically, but you could reload it again, and that will just help with reducing the file size. And if you're working on fixing your model, you might want to unload if it's not necessary to use the external file. And then we could head back to Manage Links and type reload to retrieve that file path.
It's not exactly reducing the file size, but reducing the number of geometric entities to be shown. So just your regeneration of the image will be faster.
Okay, yeah. Good point. I didn't know
that. Sorry, Eric. Did you link it with all layers or just with visible layers?
Just this one I did with visible layers, but this is my base, so everything should be shown. So I have my little lampposts and my fire hydrants and catch basins.
I see.
So I'll show you guys what it looks like when you replace your link with something that has less layers visible. So I could reload from. And what this is good for is that if you keep your drawing in the same place in AutoCAD and just select which layers are visible and not visible, then it should align exactly on top of the original external file that you loaded in. And if you loaded it with the visible layers setting on, then you should be able to insert these types of files that have different layers on and off. So here I just have my spot elevations. I'll open that to replace the file. And here's one of my spot elevations, 118.4. And if it works, then what's left is your spot elevations, which it didn't. So I'll delete this and show you guys how it should look. So visible, and you can see from the preview that that's what it should look like. Open. Bit of time. And yeah, what now is available to see are just the spot elevations. So it's a good way to switch between different data that you want to be visible, or you could load them all in and decide which is visible or not through the unloaded panel.
Can we try it again? Why it didn't work previous time?
Load from. Here I have one that is no numbers and garage. Garages are gone. And weird.
No. It can require refresh. No, can't be refresh. What do we see in the managed links? Yeah.
I have my spot elevation still.
It is still, yeah. No, it doesn't change it. Hmm.
Maybe it's a big size.
Reload from.
Okay. Manage links.
No.
Okay, it's gone. That's a weird thing that's happening. That shouldn't happen. But if that's the case, simply add a new link and just organize your external data through unloading and reloading.
Mhm.
Visible, origin to origin, open. Okay. And I will unload this so that it's not visible. That should replace it in the exact same position as well. Does anybody have any questions so far?
It won't be exactly the same position, Eric. It's independent. It's another link. And you see, you also specified like where to load. Do you think it will be? I'm not sure that it will be in the same position.
It should be in the same position if the
If it's center
drawing
to
has not
center,
moved and you've, yeah, if you
center to
placed it
center.
as origin to origin or center to center. So
So
you
if
just
you,
have to make sure that your
yeah,
loads are consistent with each other.
yeah, the same parameters and not manual insertion.
Mhm. Okay, so our
Yeah.
next item would be our massing. So if we go back to this database of links, we can go to our building height data to retrieve our 3D massings, and similarly, oh, if it's not it, where did I get it from? 3D massings. Okay, well, 3D massing. There we go. And similarly to the other link, we're selecting from divisions of our map. So I've selected 52J as my example file. We'll open it as a DWG if my computer allows me. It's not being the nicest today, so there we go. And again, it's important to sift through what information is provided in your download to know what really you should be bringing into Revit and what you shouldn't be. So what Revit doesn't really allow are meshes. If I make a selection over some of these items, and it's a big file, so it's moving a bit slow. In our properties tab, it selects. Yeah, in our properties tab, it'll show us a bunch of different types of elements. We'll have lines, meshes, hatches, blocks, 3D masses. So what we are concerned with for this type of file is just 3D masses, and everything else should be its own thing, but okay. Great. It's not selecting. Ooh. It sucks that you have to upgrade technology like every few years and can't keep the same laptop forever, just like what I'm doing. Okay, so we'll see that we have lines, 3D solids, hatches, meshes, regions, and polylines. And most of the times they're grouped in different layers, but that's not the case all the time. If I go to my parcels, much better. Okay, make the others not visible. We'll see that we have a bunch of lines that are redundant to the information that we've already loaded into our Revit. So this is something that we don't need. We don't really need roads. We don't need roads because this is a region and Revit won't like that type of element. let's see, our reference tiles. We don't need that as well because that is unrelated to our site. Like that. So what we do need remains in our massings layer. And I will turn off everything else after I have a command on. Sorry, guys. There we go. And before we link our massings, let's make sure that we don't have any undesirable elements. So block references are okay, and there aren't too many. I think there's like 4 in this file, and 3D solids is what we want. So because these are quite large, the files, I would suggest just taking a selection of the buildings that you have that are related to the site. Say you are located in this little park area, have everything that's adjacent to it to a good extent, not too much and not too little. And what you could do is you can copy that, open a new file so that you are placing it as just those building elements. Open a new file. I've already created one that's empty. Type paste. Specify, I could do 0. That should download it. So if you double click the mouse wheel, you'll zoom extents, and this is the portion of what I want brought into Revit. And there's 2 ways to do this. The first way is to keep with the native file type and save it as an AutoCAD drawing, and Revit will recognize it very easily because it's also an Autodesk software. And I will load that into Revit. But in another case, if that doesn't work well for your computer, then you can select the portions of the building that you would like to import, type export, and have this become an ACIS.sat file. And that should also work similarly to your AutoCAD. But in all cases, try your DWG first, and if that doesn't work, resort to the ACIS file. So I've saved that, and I'll head back into my Revit. I will go to the Insert tab, Manage Links, select my file, and unload it so that it won't be too much work for your computer. And because this is a 3D massing, we'll go to our Massings panel, Massings tab, and select In Place Mass. And so this creates this new, I'll say site massing is the name of this. This creates a sort of new workspace that's separate from the rest of the model. So you don't have to worry about editing an object and having it move or be affected. Similarly to when we inserted our DWG link, we're going to the Insert tab and selecting Link CAD. I have my massing as this one option, and it has the same options that you could select from: visible layers, black and white, or preserve them. In our imports, we want to keep consistent with Revit's file, so I'll select meters, and I want to keep these at origin to origin and open. Again, like the DWG files, this can take a while to load, especially if it's a large portion of buildings that you want to bring in. So make sure that you have enough time to do it and you're not doing it at the final hour of deadline. Okay, And we're still in our massings work mode. So once we're happy with the import, we'll click the check mark to finish it. I hope it will finish. Hello. Okay, so while we're waiting for it to load, there are a few things that you could do with massings. Say you have this really interesting form that you created from Rhino. It's a little bit more organic, so it's not just typical walls and floor plates or something that's more orthogonal. There's options under the Massing in site that once you import your or link your mass, you can create floor plates and walls and roofs automatically by selecting it, and that will outline the floor plate at a certain level that you're creating your floors and walls. So that's a pretty cool thing, and if I have time, I'll show you what that looks like. So we've brought this in now, and we can see if we go to our 3D view, at the top part's the little house, that now we have it, our context, the buildings, the surrounding park areas that are left blank that we could use to help create diagrams and situate our building inside. Okay, similarly, I will show you how to insert topography that you can retrieve from online in ArcGIS. So that link is also accessible through that website with a bunch of different information. And in this case, we are concerned with TRCA contours, which will bring us to Scholars GeoPortal. And it'll ask you to log in through your university in order to retrieve this information. So make sure you click Login, Ryerson, and it'll just verify that you're a student. And then from there, we could type TRCA to find our contours. And we have a bunch of information that is selectable. This drop down regarding vegetation, water sources, etc. But we're concerned with contours. This gets a little bit heavy, which you probably should use, but for the sake of this tutorial, I have the 5-meter intervals placed on top. And so once you've searched where your site is and zoomed into the portion that you would like to retrieve, you can hit this download button, select download by area of interest, and you could draw your shape through a number of different tools. So once I have this data, I'd like to select my geodatabase file type, and from there, we could download it and bring it to the ArcGIS lab, which there's a process of converting this file into a DWG or other types of files that are usable, but you have to use their software in order to achieve that. So I think the people there, the people at the GIS lab are nice enough to do it for you by asking them and showing them which part of the map you would like, or you could access it through their remote computers, which you can search through, I guess, academic computing labs, and it'll be through this link, COVID-19. You'll have this remote access link to go to the Geo Lab. And from there, you could use their computers and access their ArcGIS software. And that's a separate tutorial on its own, so you could ask them to assist you with that. But once you've retrieved your contours and have it as a usable file type, such as DWG, you can head to our Revit. And Under massing and site, simply select topo surface, and we can create our topography through an import. And as you can see, either through DWG or CSV. We're more concerned with the AutoCAD file. And is that not working?
We need to import first.
Oh, we have to import? Okay, great. So I will insert my, well, exit this mode. Let's link my CAD. And this is what I've retrieved from ArcGIS. Open. And you'll see that it's relatively flat. But right now it's just curves. So this is not useful for my topography. Once we go to massing and site, topo surface, create from import, we will select this instance over here. All these layers will be selected. You want that, and select OK. And now we have a usable surface that once we confirm it, can be used to place our buildings or situate our buildings on top, and also our linked files. And what you'll notice is that this, although if I go backspace, actually I don't need to backspace. When you linked this file, it loaded onto level 1, but it's floating above quite a bit. So it's using the absolute coordinates of these contours. And so when you start setting up your files and levels, you'll want to ensure that your level is in line with the topography. So right now I have my levels at 0, filter it. I'll go to 3D view. My levels are somewhere here. See, level 1 is at elevation 0, level 2 is at elevation 4 meters, but our topography is something like 120 or 110 meters above sea level. And you can confirm that with the DWG where it has spot elevations, it'll say something like 110, 120. So you have to ensure that your levels are in line with the elevations of your topography. So we could change that easily by selecting the level, going to the Properties tab, and changing the elevation value. Okay, that should be the gist of importing external references. So what we learned is the difference between linking and importing, and the benefit of linking because it retains that file path to the reference file, so that in case you want to update it, it would be able to be reflected into the Revit software. And we've discussed that it's important to understand what layers and information is visible so that you can reload and load new files depending on what data you want to be shown in Revit. That should be all. Does anybody have any questions or like something that I talked about you weren't really sure about?
Is there a way, I don't know if this is possible, but that on the Revit file, that huge section of the city that you have, is there a way to make it aligned with the elevation of the topo lines?
Align with the elevation. So because it's placed on a specific level, you'll have to change the level that it's placed on. Let's see if we can edit in place and adjust that. I don't know why my computer's so slow. Edit in place. And this will be our, okay, there we go. Yeah, so it's on level 1, and you if you know how your building is situated into the topography, you'll adjust the level itself. And if it needs further tweaking, you could change the value of your base offset. And unfortunately, these 3D massings won't really reflect how it's sitting on the topography, because when I downloaded it, it was all on the same plane. So for the most part, if it's a dramatic topography surface, then you'll want to import these in sections so that you can adjust those levels according to your topography. So here I could change it to level 2, and that should apply and float our building higher. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you did. I was wondering if each building separately would like adjust to where they sit on the top of, but you just said no.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're importing all this as one block almost. But there is a way to, and if, okay, this is what I was talking about in terms of massing by walls and floor and roof. I could select these objects, or select that command, and head to the object where I could create editable building elements. So in this case, I'm creating walls for this one building. And from there, you could individually modify where this building is sitting on. But that takes a little bit of work, and there's a lot of buildings. So it's up to you to decide what's important in terms of showing the overall context or having each building sit correctly on the topography.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I have a few more questions in the chat, so I'll go through these. Can't you just download a DWG file from Scholar portal for the contours? Do you have to go through this GIS lab thing? This is the way I was taught. So if you know how to do this, like
Oh, you can download DWG. Just this WG has flat contours. Contours in the DWG, they all with elevation 0. So if you want contours to be in 3D space with proper elevations, then you have to use ArcGIS.
Mm-hmm. Okay. As someone asked before, how can you edit 3D massing once you've placed it in Rhino? So if that's your intention, then you don't want to link the massing, because you're just referencing the information from that file, bringing it into Revit and letting it sit. If you want to have it more editable, you'll want to import that massing file. And from there, there's an option to explode. So I could show you what that looks like for your own benefit. Insert, import CAD, but we'll go through the massing option because it's a massing. In place mass, type massing 2. Origin, visible. Okay. And hopefully this will explode without any problems. And what I mean by explode is that it will break up this grouping of buildings or lines if it's a DWG drawing, and have them editable. So you could explode this here. And from there you could sort of select the faces, which are also considered masses, and further modify it through this these panels. So that's one way. But once you finish your mass, it's all contained as a group. So you could individually adjust them. Oh, cool, they have some grips, so you could actually modify it there on the spot. Yeah, that's how you could do it. I'm learning this too, guys. Okay. Yep, so this tutorial will be available in that Google Sheet links that I provided. It'll be on the separate tab labeled video links, and we'll have the Revit tutorial from last week as well up there, and this one should be up by either tonight or tomorrow, depending on how oh, and yep, somebody answered it. Thanks for that. Okay, guys, is there anything else?
I have one more question.
Yeah, no worries.
You're going to explain this in a later tutorial, but how would you might explain this in a later tutorial, but how would you get it into like an image or into like a diagram? Like how would you export?
Export, okay. So you could export like you would a drawing, but instead you'd be in a 3D view. So are you familiar with that concept? Exporting from a plan view? Who asked the question?
I did.
Dharma, okay, yeah. So are you familiar with exporting from a plan view?
No, not really. I'm
No,
guessing
okay.
similar to, is it similar to AutoCAD? Since it's Autodesk?
Well, typically in AutoCAD, you'd export through the layout.
Yeah.
Through the layout.
But it's a question, what's the purpose of the export? So what are you exporting it for?
Yeah, so I'm guessing if you want to show what the context is in like a 3D view, then you'd hold the 3D view and export as, what am I don't quite remember, or is it print? Yeah, probably this one, Control Print. And select as an Adobe PDF. And
would they be vectors? Vectors, sorry?
These, you could choose if they're vectors or not. So if they aren't a raster, if there's no raster images and if there's no shadows, then everything should be produced as a vector. Otherwise, you'll have the raster processing. And so through this dialog box, you can select the window. So my window here is what I would see if I had this option selected, or you could, if you had views of these or sheets of these views, then you would select these, or yeah, the visible portion of your current window, and export your view as a PDF. Otherwise, you yeah, no, I think this would be the best way to Control P or head to File, Print, and
would the lines be hidden, like hidden lines? I'm guessing.
yeah, whatever your visual display is in currently, so I could change it through this box over here to wireframe or shaded, and that should be whatever's visible in your viewport that could be printed.
Okay.
But wouldn't be like not better, but in some cases, you can just create a sheet for this kind of diagram, and then you can just create a layout on this sheet with this view on your model, right?
Definitely, yeah. That takes a little more like
it is more Revit
setup
style.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you could refer back to it and not have to find the exact same angle of your view. So you could do it that way, or we could take a sheet, just use the default here, drag this view from our 3D views into that sheet. Oh my God, I'm scared it's gonna be huge.
Yeah.
Change the scale of the drawing. So if we double click, we're entering into the workspace of this view. Change this to something like 1 to 1,000, honestly. Double click outside, and we're back into the sheet view. And again, this will require some more tweaking in terms of your crop borders. So these two toggles allow you to have them cropped or not, and having a border to adjust those crops. So if that's your 3D view that you want to show, we've adjusted the border, which is activated through this button, hide crop region. So we could hide it or keep it on. And this crop view allows us to choose whether we want it to be cropped or not to this border. So if I have the X toggled off, then that would be our view on our sheet and also in our working view. So you're not only making the changes in the sheet, but also to the view. Here I could toggle off whether this border is shown or not, double click outside. Otherwise you're still working inside this view.
Yeah.
And then from there you could print the sheet. Do the same command, Control P, and instead we'll do selected views or sheets where there's a drop-down menu to select from those. So you say you have multiple floor plans and views that you want to show, just select those as long as they're the same file or paper size, which you select through the setup panel here.
Yeah, and also there is a benefit. This approach is beneficial for your team. If you are usually on a big project, you are not working alone in Revit, right? And then you keep all your documentation, including your like 3D views even, right? And diagrams. You're keeping them all in Revit, and they like everybody can access it as a reference, or if somebody else has to work on it in the future. So everything is in Revit. It's more organized.
Thanks for your question.
This is just a small one though. Because it's in shaded view and like there's colors and whatnot, would those colors show when you print a PDF?
They should show as long as you have color on. So that's
because of the colors, it would have to be rasterized, correct?
I think so. Yeah, if you have any shadows or shaded items, then it'll be rasterized.
No, shadows can be vector also. That's,
oh, yeah?
I'm not sure how it is in Revit. I cannot tell you.
Revit,
in general,
will automatically
it will.
rasterize.
Yeah, I see. Because in general, in some software, shadows can be vector, can be raster. For example, in ArchiCAD, shadows can be vector.
So it might be useful to do one that's just wireframe or hidden line. So you get your lines, and then another for a background for your color and shadows. And you can select that from here, this drop-down menu.
Got it.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.